Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Saturday, March 11, 2023. It's 10:30 in the morning here on the East Coast of the United States, 5:30 in the evening in Eastern Ukraine, the place from which Matt VanDyke joins us. Matt is, of course, the founder and director of Sons of Liberty International, where he and his colleagues help train Ukrainian forces in Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, a dangerous place in which to be. And he's kind enough to come to us live. Matt, always a pleasure. Welcome back to the show. So I know that you have been involved in the detonation or neutering of unexploded devices, and you've sent us some very interesting videos and still photos. So we're going to share them with the audience now, and then you and I can talk about them. So Gary, put up this first one showing a missile in a house, in the wall of a house. All right, that's you. What is that your hand is on?
That is a Russian missile that is in a village. They're actually scattered all throughout the village. That one went through a wall. Usually they land in the yard or in the fields, sticking right out of the ground. That's mostly the tail section of the missile, except a lot of these, including that one, still have the warhead attached, which was a failure on the missile's part that didn't detonate. But we found more than 20 of these that need to be neutralized and then hauled out.
Right. So is that missile live as you're touching it? Is it with a live warhead on the other side of that brick wall?
That one is. Touching it's okay. Pulling it out is not. It has to be rendered harmless before it's removed from the house and from the ground. Some of them hit the ground so hard. We actually looked at some today that were completely underground, where you see the crater, but nothing's there. And it's because the missile went underground and sometimes travels several feet beneath the surface. Those we're going to have to go back and excavate, but eventually we'll get these out. A lot of them we're going to remove ourselves, actually.
Is this the failure of Russian technology, or are they just scattershot? They're aiming at a small village, a house.
They were aiming at the village, but the fact that they didn't detonate on impact is certainly a failure. The failure rate seems to be quite high on these. Actually, most of these were probably made in the 70s and 80s and have been sitting. They probably weren't made that well to begin with. But again, we found about 24 of these just in one small village, scattered throughout. Oftentimes,
okay. And you and your team are able to neutralize that. You're not going to leave that live warhead in that person's house,
right? We're going to neutralize some of them, and Ukraine's emergency services will do others that we don't have the equipment for.
Okay.
So it's a
Gary,
mix.
I think there's a video of that or one that looks just like it. Can you run that video?
Yeah, I think that's she's still ready to play. 300.
Now, who are those? I'm putting my head down as if I was trying to look into the thing. Sorry. Who are those fellows? And is that the same one that we just saw a picture of with you?
Right, that's my EOD team. His name's Stu. He was checking the missile to see if the warhead was still inside. You can see through the back of the missile whether the warhead was separated before the impact or whether it's still inside.
How much damage to that house would the warhead have done had it exploded?
It would have destroyed the house.
Okay.
Completely.
Okay. Gary, the next video, please, which I think is of a demining operation.
They want to do from this position. That's clear.
Right now, where is that, if you can tell us, and who are those guys and what were they doing?
It's also in Eastern Ukraine. That's my mining team again. They're sweeping for mines. So a lot of it is done by metal detector and just step by step looking for hits on mines. It's a very difficult thing to do because the area is covered with shrapnel. as a lot of this battlefield is. And you have to determine which hits are just shrapnel, which are mines, mark them, go back, excavate, and then decide whether render it safe, dig it up, or keep it in place and destroy it.
Okay. We're going to show you now a video of what appears to be a detonation. Now, Matt and I have seen this, and for all of you wonderful folks watching, just be patient. We'll get to the point of it at the end of the video. Gary?
That's a bag and a half. Well done.
Okay, what was that white stake with the red top, and then what did we witness towards the horizon in that video?
Well, we use the stakes to mark mines and safe paths to walk through mines. The explosion was a collection of mostly anti-tank mines that we had found that then Ukraine Emergency Services put inside a pit and detonated. It was a massive explosion. We were several hundred meters away, and you could feel just a blast pass right over your skin, the pressure wave. But that was a mass detonation. We also sent a photo to you of several of the mines before they were detonated that goes with that.
Right. Okay. So what are we looking at there? Are those Russian mines? Does that mean that Russian troops were physically there and physically implanted those things in the earth?
Right. Those are Russian anti-tank mines. They're all over the place there. There's also anti-personnel mines. The explosion that you just saw was, I think, about 5 or 6 of those together in the pit with the explosive. They were actually detonated in what the Russians had used as a trench or as a fighting position dug in the ground that then we used for detonating.
Now, what would set that off? I mean, what would happen if a human being stepped on it? Would it go off, or does it require metal, or does it require the type of pressure that only a tank would impose?
That type of mine requires the amount of pressure of a vehicle. So a car or truck would set it off, completely destroy the vehicle, often completely destroy a tank as well. But there's also anti-personnel mines. They've also have anti-personnel mines with anti-lift, which are just designed to kill miners if they try to remove them out of the ground. So it's a very tricky spot. My mighty miners have said in their 20 years, each experience is the worst minefield they've ever been in.
Gary, let's go to the next still. What are we looking at here, Matt?
This is sweeping one of the fighting positions. That the Russians had that they put mines around for us to, hoping that as they fled, that Ukrainians would get killed stepping on the.
All right. So are those your guys in uniforms that say EOD?
Yes.
And what does EOD stand for in English?
Explosive Ordnance Disposal.
And is that insignia on their shoulder patch? By the way, is one of them you?
No, that's Stu and somebody we're cooperating with, Trevor.
Okay. And the insignia on their shoulders, is that something recognized by the Ukraine troops and the Ukraine government, and even recognized by the Russians?
EOD is the standard designation for explosive ordnance disposal. Beneath that is his Sons of Liberty International patch, which I hope the Russians have started to recognize and get to know real well, because we're not going anywhere.
All right. Next still, Gary. What is that?
That is another part of a missile being found within a building.
Is that live, what that fellow has in his hands?
No, I believe that's just part of the tail section.
Okay. Next photo, Gary. All right. Well, that we've seen. All right. So I guess the process is never ending. You're in Eastern Ukraine. You're looking for mines do you detonate them like the ones we saw that you were a few hundred meters away from at the time of the detonation? Or is there a safer, less violent way to neutralize them?
Well, there's really three ways. We can neutralize it and remove it, which is the least preferred option. We can call Ukrainian emergency services, which have the explosives, and like they did there, they take several of the mines we find at once and destroy them. Or we can destroy them ourselves, which we actually did this week by a ballistic method using a M14 rifle and firing on them from a distance, which explodes them in place, which is actually of course, our preferred method of doing it.
Gary, can you put up the picture of the missile in the house where Matt is touching the tail end protruding from the house? There we go. What became of the live part, the unexploded live part of that, the part that's on the other side of the brick wall?
That's still in there. That photo was taken earlier today. What we've been doing in that village is doing the survey. So a local official will take us around the village and show us where people have reported missiles, in that case through the house, or often just in the yard or in the fields. And we go to each location, mark the location, see if there's still a live explosive in it, take notes, and then we'll either deal with it or Ukraine Emergency Services will.
All right, this may sound like a naive question, but I assume that in your team are explosive experts, people who know from looking at this thing whether it's still alive.
Right, the EOD team are all explosive experts. In the earlier video, when one was looking inside, that's what he was examining the missile to see if it's safe or not. In that case, it's not.
Very dangerous work you're doing. How close have you been to live fire, if you can tell us?
I mean, there's artillery in the area. We hear artillery throughout the day. Really, for this particular mission, we did some training this week, but a lot of it is we are going through minefields and through villages and helping out with the landmine problem. We're going to be winding up more of our training soon.
There's one. What is that, Matt?
Those are the collection of anti-tank mines that we found that were the ones exploding in the large explosion in the video you showed earlier.
All right, so you physically removed them from the earth and then compacted them together and then detonated them.
Right, and then Ukraine Emergency Services came in with explosives to do the detonation.
How dangerous is it to pull those things out of the earth and transport them to a ditch or a hole in the ground?
It's dangerous removing them. The anti-tank mines aren't as dangerous transporting them a short distance to the pit, but they could always be rigged with traps. So it's the whole work is very dangerous.
All right. What is the attitude, or are you able to get your finger on the pulse of the attitude of the Ukrainian people or the Ukrainian military? We'll start with the Ukrainian people. After 10 million of them have left, and we don't know how many are dead. Are they still have high morale for resisting the Russians, or do you have a different view of their stamina and their intentions?
Morale's very high. Now the big question is people are looking forward to who does the offensive in spring. Is it going to be Russia? Is it going to be Ukraine? Both sides seem determined to do an offensive. It's a matter of who's more successful at doing it, or maybe offensives occur by both sides in different areas of the country. But that's the big question. But people are very optimistic because they know a lot of Western equipment's coming, tanks from the UK, Germany, and the United States. They think it will be a game changer, and hopefully it will be.
Is there fear of the onslaught that we've been hearing about, 300 to 500,000 troops? Russian troops?
There's certainly a concern, but I mean, they look at fronts like Bakhmut, where I mean, it's Ukraine's clinging on a bit, but if there was going to be an onslaught, Russia would have put it there, and it hasn't happened. So I think that gives some encouragement that perhaps Russia isn't ready to do that, or Russia doesn't have the logistics to do it. But it's still a question where these conscripts are that Russia has mobilized. But it looks like they don't have logistics to do this massive offensive that people have feared.
If the Russians do take Bakhmut, that would be a serious setback for the Ukrainian forces, would it not?
It would be a bit of a setback in morale, but I think people know that it's been a long fight. A lot of Russians have died. Bakhmut is not as important strategically as some other places in Ukraine. But I mean, they don't want to lose it. But as Zelensky has said, it's been accepted that they're not going to sacrifice, forever there. At some point, the calculation will be if it needs to be withdrawn from, they'll withdraw from it. But they've given it a hell of
it sounds like they expect to lose it and are looking to resist the Russians in another place. Fair assessment?
Yeah, fair assessment. And there's some high ground outside of Bakhmut that if Russians take Bakhmut, Ukraine will start shelling, and it's not the end of the world by far.
Is it? I didn't see this in any of the pictures you showed us. And maybe it was just a dry day. Is it the muddy season now as we leave winter and enter spring? I mean, I'm asking about this because of tanks. From your military experience and from your observations, what mud can do to tanks. And of course, mud is not ideological. What it does to the Russian tanks, it will do to the tanks that the U.S. and the British and the Germans have sent. Is it the muddy season yet?
It's definitely the muddy season already. We've had a warm end of winter here. Ukraine gets a sort of a permafrost under the surface that when we first started the demining work, we could only probe down a few inches. It was very difficult. Now, after some warm weather, it's turned to mud, and this is a mud like I've never seen anywhere else in the world. The amount of moisture in the Ukrainian soil is unbelievable. The mud gets, a foot deep in places. It's constantly all over the boots. Today we had to pull a press vehicle out of the mud using our truck. It's really on a whole other level. It's hard to even imagine. Really, it will take tracked vehicles, the tanks, the Bradleys. Everything's going to be really essential to be able to do any sort of offensive now that it's spring and the ground softened up. It's going to make things a lot more difficult.
You mentioned a press vehicle. Are you working with Western journalists?
Yeah, journalists come. We take them to what they want to see, help them out. Same thing we did during previous missions. Well, we did in Iraq as well. We also provide things like free rides, translation, housing for journalists.
Okay, I won't use any proper names, but if you come across any of my buddies from Fox that I worked with for 24 years, give them my best.
Sure. Well, we'd be happy to see them out here.
Matt VanDyke from somewhere in eastern Ukraine. Be safe, and thank you very much for joining us as always, Matt. And thanks so much for those photographs, the likes of which I haven't seen before. And I know from the comments, even people that disagree with you politically and ideologically appreciate the information that you've made available, especially the visuals. Thank you, Matt.
Anytime. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you. Judge Napolitano, more as we get it for Judging Freedom.